I'm Helen, therapist, author, and your host of the I Don't Think We Talk Enough About podcast, where each week I'm joined by wonderful guests who bring their warmth, wisdom, and wealth of experience to talk about the things I just don't think we talk enough about. And today we're diving into a topic that so many of us carry quietly, the belief that we're not good enough. Whether it shows up as perfectionism, people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, or the endless pressure to prove ourselves. This feeling has a way of running the show behind the scenes. And even when we're self-aware, even when we know it's not true, it can still feel true. So my guest today is Dr. Mandy Lehto, a coach, writer, speaker, and host of the Enough podcast. She helps high achievers move beyond burnout and chronic self-doubt. Mandy brings both lived experience and deep professional insight to this conversation. She's known for her ability to meet people with compassion and clarity, and to help them gently but powerfully shift their inner narrative around enoughness. In this episode, we explore where that not enough belief comes from, how it can hide in plain sight, and what it actually takes to start rewriting that story. Mandy also shares some incredibly practical tools to help you begin using straight away. So if you've ever asked yourself, why do I still feel like I'm not enough, or I can't find that feeling of enoughness, even when I'm doing everything I can, this conversation is one for you. Mandy, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much. I waited a long time to play with you, Helen. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, and it's so lovely to finally meet you. Having followed you on Instagram for ages, had conversations on Instagram, we've never met. And here we are today.
Here we are.
No,
Yay.
it's beautiful. And that face-to-face makes so much difference, doesn't it? That real life feeling. You can feel it, can't you?
I can.
It's so lovely to finally have you here. Obviously, I mentioned in the introduction, we want to talk about that pesky feeling of good enough. And before we went on camera, you were talking about enoughness, one of my favourite words. Do you just want to, in a nutshell, sort of describe what you meant by that?
Enoughness for me is the felt sense of our wholeness. So our wholeness never changes from the moment we draw our first breath. From the moment we draw our last breath, we are always whole. Our felt sense of it, however, that can be intermittent. It's more like weather, and certain things happen. We compare ourselves to strangers on the internet, or we have a bad day or a wonky week, or something happens, and we start to criticize ourselves, and we move away from this felt sense of wholeness on the regular. And that's absolutely normal and human. So I think about enoughness as something that comes and something that goes, whilst our wholeness underneath remains intact. Now, there's certain things we can do, practices we can put into place, awareness of when we've drifted away from our enoughness. But I think there's this expectation of, I need to feel enough. And when I achieve this, or when I do the kitchen renovation, or when I get the six-pack, or when I get the guy, or the glass box office, or whatever it is, when I get those things, or when I get those, status markers, or whatever they might be, then I will be enough. But actually, in my sample study of one, I've been thinking about this for almost 20 years and really nerding out on it. It comes and it goes, and that's okay. It's not a permanent state. And we get better at catching when we fall out of that felt sense of our wholeness. And that's when we can actually start to do something about it. But I wanted to set that up right at the beginning, because enoughness isn't living 24/7 in this Pollyanna state of like, I am bulletproof and confident. It isn't that at all.
It doesn't take away from your wholeness that's always there. I love the way you explained that. And I was really thinking about the way you said about we can learn to catch ourselves moving away from wholeness. And we can catch ourselves. And when we do catch ourselves, it's then about looking at, hang on, what made me feel not good enough in that moment? Where did I get disconnected from my wholeness?
Yes.
What moved me away? And I'm thinking of my own experience here, and it can so often be others' voices, can't it? The outside noise. And I talk about this so often on this podcast about how we have our world has just got so big. So big, and actually what we need to do is start making it smaller again.
Yes.
Because how do you ever feel that wholeness when your life is compared to so many, and we are bringing comparison here as well, when there's so many people out there on such a scale doing what appears to be so much.
And what's the belief that we've created that we need to be in competition with that, and that we feel inadequate compared to all of these strangers on the internet? And I think this is the challenge. There will always be people who are cuter, faster, smarter, more talented, richer, any of the standard metrics that we can put in. It's a game we can never win. And I think this is the frustration and the downward inner spiral and the challenge to mental health when we think that enoughness needs to look a certain way. But wholeness, if we actually think about that foundational concept of our wholeness, I always say wholeness is the whole mess. Mm. Feeling not enough is part of wholeness.
Yeah.
That it's not just the good things. If we're going to put a value judgment on it, it's not just the good things. It's also part of our wholeness is really being in ownership of our humanity. We're here having a human experience. Intermittently feeling not enough is part of that.
Yeah, of course. And that's so beautifully said. And even as you were coming back to that word again of wholeness, I could feel it really landing on me. You know, it's very calming to the nervous system when we actually open up space for, as you say, the human experience, all of it. You know, we're not just meant to be one emotion or one feeling or one-dimensional. We're so many different layers, aren't we? And you're normalizing the human experience by bringing in what those layers are to be whole. And the enoughness is, as you say, is one element of those.
That's right.
When I was doing some research on you, that doesn't sound right. But when I was researching for this conversation today, and I was looking through your wonderful Instagram posts, and you have a really poignant one pinned at the top of your Instagram about your story. And I felt sad that I hadn't known that about you before, because I hadn't looked at the pinned post before. I see your posts come up on Instagram and I like them, I might comment. And I didn't know your background and what you'd been through and your own story of really feeling that deep sadness of not feeling enough. And I don't know if you want to share that here.
I will go back and give you a couple of memory Polaroids, and then that will contextualize what if I remember correctly, what my mom said in reference to that post. My father was a school teacher at the school, a little village school where I grew up in Northern Ontario. I grew up on a farm. It was rural. We had pigs and cows and chickens, lots of land. And I remember being a young woman and already feeling not enough in my body because I had to perform at school. There was nowhere to hide. And my father was living out his own trauma, which of course I couldn't have known as a child, but there was always huge pressure to win, to get A's, to get 10 out of 10s. And love was withdrawn. So I got silent treatment or worse if that didn't happen. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table and my father snapping his fingers to times tables, and I had to answer times tables almost to that metronome, to the point where I was sobbing and begging, let it be enough now, let it be enough now. And it wasn't only on the kind of academic side, it was on the sporting side. I remember once I was in a cross-country race, and my best friend and I were skiing and having a really nice time, and she fell over in the snowbank. And I stopped, of course, to help her up. Her hat was all wonky, and she had snot dripping down her upper lip, and she looked so of course, I'm not going to leave her there. So I extended my ski pole and we crossed over the finish line together. And then we went to get marshmallows and hot chocolate afterwards. And at home, I didn't even know it was coming, but my father was so furious with me that I didn't win the race, that I stopped. So it was constantly walking on eggshells in hypervigilance of understanding that if I didn't get to be the best human, then that would be punished. And so it wasn't just the sporting angle and the intellectual angle, it was also the physical angle. There was a vignette that is in my mind of there was a lake behind our house where we went swimming. I was 12 years old. We were hiking in the woods and it was super hot. We were going to jump in. I didn't have my swimming costume. And all the rest were boys. My father and my very cute 13-year-old cousin was visiting, and my brothers and a few of school friends. And my father said, "Oh, well, just take your top off and jump in. Nobody's going to pay any attention to those little fly bites." And those sorts of things, in hindsight, I said, like, oh, that's the spaghetti trail of where those things came from, that I just brushed off and used super achieving and being a good girl as my ticket to get out of there eventually. But my brain never got the memo as a very grown-up woman that this is no longer serving me. So I think for me, I discovered that trying to look physically as perfect as possible, being very sporty, winning all the gold ribbons, focusing on achievement, that sort of thing was ingrained in me, that this was the way to win. This was the way to be enough. And not being those things meant irrelevance. It meant punishment. So there was something in my little childhood brain that figured out how to pony up what was needed. I needed to be a certain way to be acceptable, to belong, to be lovable. And I always sort of knew that I was a disappointment, even though I was valedictorian and I ended up doing a PhD at Cambridge and all of having grown up in the sticks in the middle of nowhere with no money and no connections. But it was never enough. And I remember my father died actually when he was my age.
Wow.
So I just turned 54. He died at the age of 53 from his own alcoholism and trauma. And back in those days, people didn't go to therapists, unfortunately. My mother told me on my 53rd birthday that basically my father always had a problem that I was born, that because I came along, he didn't get to live out his dreams because he had to look after me, because he was in teacher's college. He had to go to a less good teacher's college because he had to look after me. And so there was always that residue of low-grade resentment. And I have a feeling that's what was passed on to me through some of those passive-aggressive comments.
Of course it was.
And through some of those behaviors. I was living his unlived life.
Okay. I can feel that. I can feel that. And it's deep within your story and your script, isn't it? It's there. I can only imagine how that drove your decisions in life. I can only imagine how it did, where you're constantly trying to prove, to fight, and also trying to, well, probably never ever finding enough. And thank you for sharing that. And I just feel as a therapist, as a fellow human, I feel really sad by that story. It's just, when you go back to that inner child part of you, she was so young, so young. And then you, in your post that really resonated with me on Instagram, you talked about having other examples of that as you grew up. But they always came, the narrative was always coming from someone else outside. You know, you don't look a certain way. You've let yourself go. All of these messages that you internalize. I just wanted to come, because I screenshotted a couple. It's very professional, isn't it? You said, I was always trying to outrun my past. And here's what followed. And she said, your doctorate from Cambridge, a prestigious banking job, TV appearances, awards, media, people asking, how do you do it all? And then behind the scenes, Do you want me to say what was behind the scenes, or do you want to?
Please go ahead.
So behind the scenes, and this was so poignant, Mandy. Behind all of that, of what everyone sees as this showy, sparkly, good enough, was twice divorced, grief, anxiety, headaches, body aches, digestive upset, chronic perioral dermatitis, severe burnout, and fibromyalgia. That was all underneath that no one else could see. And it reminds me when Dr. Lolita Siglani was here talking about high-functioning anxiety and the image of the swan. And there you are, that beautiful, graceful swan that everyone sees above the water. But underneath, you're just kicking away. And I just wonder what came up for you as I read that out loud here.
I think you're right about the sadness. I had a lot of anger around all of that for a long time, which wasn't part of the good girl script. Because, you know, we're socialized to be pleasant, pretty, pleasing, don't rock the boat, be passive. So I've worked a lot through the anger and burned a lot of that off. And I've realized that under anger is often sadness and grief.
Truly.
And it's not like the most fun feeling in the world to feel, but feelings must be felt. That's one thing I know for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the older, wiser me has a huge amount of compassion. And I realized that I was going through life as a hologram.
Tell me.
I was a projection of all the things I thought I needed to be. But actually, if anybody stopped and kind of went to put their hand through it, it would just go right through it. It's a projection because none of that is real or sustainable, which is why I was a disaster in romantic relationships until my current relationship, because I was never going in as me, because I didn't actually know who I was. And I think this is the challenge of all of this not enoughness, at least from so many of the women who I coach and my own experiences, because I had to be something all the time for someone else. I never actually got to explore, who am I? When I don't have to be somebody, who am I? How do I like my pasta? Where do I like to go on holiday? What do I like to do with my free time? If I'm not working, am I still okay? All of those basic explorations that we often do as young people, I felt like I never got there. So it's very difficult as an extremely grown-up woman to be thinking, I don't actually know what I like. I don't know what I want. And I think that is where all of those romantic relationships or even work relationships, like I'll be whoever you need me to be, and where all those coping mechanisms can kick in, like imposter syndrome roiling under the surface, but then that super achiever, paste on a smile, let's just get on with the show, show must go on. And all of that is happening on the surface, and it's this bifurcated self. And that's not sustainable. And I mean, it doesn't surprise me that connection never happened. I had a really profound conversation once with a fellow coach who kind of knew me on the surface, and he knew my hologram. And he said, you're so impressive. And I was just blossoming on the inside. He's saying, you're so impressive. He was pandering to my hologram.
Of course he was.
And then he leaned forward and he looked at me and he said, I want to tear that down.
Wow.
I was so discombobulated, I had no idea I actually burst into tears because he just found a chink in my armor. He said, I don't know how to relate to you. He said, you're interesting to talk to, like a shiny new gadget, but then I want to go and have a beer with my friends. Like, I don't know what to do with you.
Wow.
And I had this big aha moment that this technique that I had subconsciously been using to try so hard to fit in was actually separating me from other people, because nobody could see my muffin top. Nobody could see me stressing out about things. Nobody could see all those things that I was tap dancing so hard to keep out of sight because I thought I had to be this. And all of a sudden, that's a big identity quake.
Yeah, huge.
When someone confronts you and says, actually, I want the warts and all version of you, I don't even know what that looks like. So that was a real unlearning, a real long, intense period of I can only call it discombobulation.
Oh, I love that story. And again, that word of sadness comes up from, I suppose, my therapy training, really, my therapy perspective. Because your story, sadly, isn't unique. And you know that from all the coaching you do. So many people hiding behind that hologram. And actually, when we think about the way we really deeply connect with others, we love people showing us their humanness. We love it when someone says, oh, I really mucked up today. I had a really crap day and it all went wrong. And just that feeling of, oh, wow, someone's just shown me that they've made mistakes, that they're human. I remember a doctor years ago, my GP years ago, and I was going through something within the family, and I knew something wasn't okay and I needed to go to the doctor. And I was on a cancellation list, so it meant I had to sit in the waiting room for hours, and I sobbed in that waiting room and sobbed. I don't know where, it was just the space to allow me to just sob. And I eventually went into her consulting room, and she said, have you told your family about this or shared with them? And I was like, absolutely not. You know, they think that I'm absolutely okay, and, you know, I'm there for them. And she just said, you need to let them see you. And it was that moment of, I've just again been showing who I think I should be as a mother, who I should be as a wife, who I should be as a daughter, a friend, a sister. But again, I hadn't ever asked the question, who am I? You know, and it's a really confronting question, isn't it? Because
It sounds so simple.
but it's not. It's so not simple. But actually, people really connect on that authentic level. I make it quite known here, but actually, it's my daughter here that manages my podcast, and I think she's very aware of that contrast between who I used to be and that. Oh my gosh, you know, I'm here and I'm human now. I know which one my children prefer. It's that I'm here and I'm normal and I'm human. And you can also be human. It's safe for you to be human. You know, we're learning so much from our caregivers, aren't we?
We are.
You know, so much. And you must know that in your role as a mother as well. Mandy, you said to me before we came on camera, you said that you'd gone down a really deep healing road with this. But some really interesting healing, and I really want to go through, because you must bring that into your own coaching practice with people as well. Tell me, they're things I have never heard of, so tell me.
Some of these things I actually actively pursued because I was working with a coach when my body actually shut down entirely, which was probably good for me at the time, but it kind of sucked, I'm not going to lie. The relentless pushing of myself. I had just left investment banking. I had 2 young children under the age of 4. I had started 2 businesses. I was like, I don't need any help. I can do it all. And my body had other plans. So as I was becoming increasingly tired, my nerves were becoming increasingly jangled. I had outsized, rageful responses, which I managed and pushed down, but they were there.
Of course they were.
Children learning to play the recorder tends to have...
Oh my gosh, we've all been there.
Or arguing over some toy that bleeps, that many of those mysteriously disappeared. But those outsized responses, and I realized like the people I love the most were getting the worst of me. So I thought, I need to get my ducks in a row. So I'm going to drink more coffee. I'm going to hire the most intimidating looking personal trainer I can, who's going to do high intensity interval training with me. And you can see how this is going to go horribly wrong. But that was how I knew how to do better and how to get myself in gear. So I was at the gym one day, and he had put me to run on a treadmill on, I think, a 10 incline at maximum speed. I was practically foaming at the mouth. And I'm like, I can do it. I can do more. And then we did boxing. I don't know if you've ever done boxing, Helen, but it is bloody hard to box. And the gloves stink. I was like, oh no, do we really need to do box? We did the boxing. I'm like, okay, let's do the boxing. And he was teaching me to do these uppercuts. And then I had to do these high kicks up to his shoulder. And I absolutely plummeted onto the gym floor. And I thought, oh, okay. When I kind of came to very quickly, I went to splash some cold water on my face. I looked like And I actually felt embarrassed going back and saying I couldn't do it. I said, maybe I'm coming down with something. And I remember going home and climbing up the stairs on all fours and getting into the shower. And I let the hot shower run till the walls were running with condensation. And I just held the walls of the shower. I'm like, get it together, Lehto, get it together. And then basically I end up with a towel turbaned on my head and my bathrobe, and I completely collapsed like an X on the bed and slept the sleep of the dead right through my school pickup. And this is when like big red flags started happening. Somebody who's extremely diligent like me, I was like, no. So I needed to fix this. And I ended up in almost 10 years of debilitating burnout. So if I fast forward from there to having spent at least a year in pretty much entirely in bed, my worth as a human being dissipating daily because I couldn't do.
You went through that,
I did. I was cut off from the ability to do. My husband had to deal with the children and sometimes help me wash my hair and all the things. I really thought, what is the point of me? There were moments that I thought, this is a pointless existence. I'm useless. So it was a drying out period for me of being off my addiction to working and doing.
Of course.
And coming out the other side, I started to work with a coach, and she said, girl, you got to get out of your body. You are a head on legs. I was like, okay, here I am with my clipboard. How do I do that? I mean, which is
with your head.
Hilarious. It's quite hilarious. So she sent me to do a wild woman retreat where we danced to Shania Twain songs in the nude and got into our bodies. And I was like, I can do this. I can be good at this.
Oh, that language, that narrative again.
It's funny because it's an unpicking. I share this because anybody listening who's unlearning, identifying with being a doer, it's hard.
Yes.
And it just keeps popping up. It's like you pull a dandelion, there it is again, there it is again, there it is again. It's this. And over years and years, I flew to Arizona to sit in the presence of, one of the top coaches in the world. And we spoke, and he looked at me and he said, nobody's coming to save you, Mandy. It's like, well, you could have told me that on an email before I flew 12 hours to sit here. And I mean, all the things, I'll give you a whistle-stop tour. I sat on mountainsides in Sedona having lineage meditations with a shaman and sort of seeing myself in a lineage of other women. And then, additionally taking from that, like, oh, the pressure. I have all of these things and opportunities and education that the women in my lineage didn't have, and I need to go and do something with this now. And the shaman was like, could you look at this another way? Like, could you see that you're supported? Because we did a meditation where in my mind's eye, I could see this sepia, all these sepia images of these women who work the land. And, my ancestors, some who I recognized from photographs. And there was a little me there with my pigtails and my mother and my grandmothers and my aunties. And it was just such a perspective shift of you are held. You don't have to do all of this alone. And then there's me with my clipboard. I'm like, okay, how do I tap into getting my ancestry? And I say that with all great love for myself. And there were various other things too. Like, it's the accumulation of all of these things that I can look at with such humor now. But I really went at them like an A-star pupil. I could sense
that. You're approaching them wanting to do your best at it, be the best at it.
Because then I'll get the juice.
Then you'll get it.
And then I'll get to be who I used to be. I'll get my identity back.
But as you say that, I think, where was the identity? I think that's an interesting conversation in itself, isn't it? Because I'm not sure you did want to go back to who you were, because I don't think that's who you were.
But that's the whole thing about clinging to what we know, right? Loss aversion. When this whole other possibility is open to me. And the reason I say it this way is I did not go down that route with open arms like Maria von Trapp in The Sound of Music, swinging my arms around and happy. I fought it.
You were still in your head.
Every step of the way.
Still in your head.
So my coach upped the ante and she sent me to Tantra.
Okay.
And I put it off and I put it off and I put it off until it was practically our coaching session. I'm like, is this going to be like Sting and Trudy and like mass orgies and baby oil and all the things? Like, I didn't know what Tantra was. I was so resistant. And then I went to work with a practitioner, and she was basically doing, it was just the two of us. There was no orgy thing happening, which was, I was decidedly grateful for. And she actually did this energy work on me on a massage bed. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then she found what I've affectionately called a big energetic hairball caught in my solar plexus. She said, is there a sad little girl here? And I remember laying there looking up at the clock, and I'm thinking, we have about 7 minutes left, so she's not really going to go there now, is she? And she ended up having the room for extra time. She's like, can you stay a bit longer? I was like, oh no, we're going there. And basically, she asked me to start dialoguing with this little girl and asked what she wanted to say. And that's when the hologram basically imploded. And there was no going back to, I tried, Helen, I really tried to reassemble, but I realized that I was kind of like one of those Russian nesting dolls. Like, there was so many of me. It had never occurred to me in that way before. And there was so much that she wanted to say.
Oh, I bet there was.
So beginning that path of understanding that I was multiple selves and they all had things to tell me, beginning that journey of embodiment and feeling the feelings that I had refused to feel for so many years, that were pushed down with manhole covers, keeping them there. And then I started to work a lot on somatic stuff, like on anger and releasing anger, and doing a couple of primal screams with people who really know what they were doing. And it felt like an uncorking.
I love that.
And there was snot, and my mascara was everywhere, but it felt so the feeling of liberation felt more vital and more important than what I was trying to push down, because I felt that my time of pushing things down, I had no more energy for that. It was taking so much energy. It's like, you know, holding a basketball underwater, like you're constantly pushing it down and it wants to come up. And I think there was something in that tantric session that uncorked me, that meant I couldn't push things down anymore. And that began a whole different journey of really starting to feel sadness and grief in safe spaces, because I just didn't want to walk around like a gaping wound. I still had to function, and I was feeling better enough to start looking after the children and running my business again, little by little. But it was not linear. It was, in hindsight, a lot of it was quite comical, but it was tough at the time, like learning how to be in my body. And I think those grooves are so deep that I still fall into those behaviors. And I can look at myself hustling for worth. I can look at myself striving. I can be trying to prove myself, particularly to male authority figures who sort of dismiss me. And then something rises in me, you know, like a little Matilda. I'm going to rise up and...
Well, of course.
So it's I think what I've learned in the few things I've shared with you, and there's plenty more, but what I've shared is that I don't want to hold it down anymore. Yeah. I'm softer this way. I'm a little wonkier this way, but I'm much more relatable. Not that that's my objective, but you know what I'm in touch with that feels really, really wonderful, that most of my life I think I've been numb.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. Just with the story you share from childhood, I can understand that, and the relationships that you had as a result of your early start in life as well. The inauthenticity, the not being you, you know, the striving, the not feeling you're good enough, not having that enoughness. Of course you are numb to it. They're not pleasant feelings, are they? You're not going to open up those wounds regularly.
No, because then it warps your hologram.
If you're in private practice, you know how much care and attention goes into each session you hold. But But outside of the therapy room, there's a whole other side of the work: scheduling, documentation, billing, insurance, telehealth, and it can all add up. That's where Simple Practice can really help. It's an all-in-one electronic health record built to support the flow of your practice. Everything's connected: your calendar, client notes, billing, and even secure telehealth, all in one place. The goal isn't just efficiency, it's ease, so you can spend less time juggling tasks and more time being present with your clients and with yourself. Whether you're growing your practice or looking to simplify your systems, Simple Practice offers a sense of calm and clarity in the middle of it all. For new customers, you can get an exclusive promotion by going to simplepractice.com/Helen Marie and get a 7-day free trial, then 70% off for 4 months. Please see show notes for more details. Mandy, I'm loving the way that what you're describing is your experience of striving in a body that never felt good enough. And then you took that into, thank goodness, into your work to become a coach, to work with people on feeling good enough, on enoughness. How has your experience really helped you in that work? What is it you're seeing in your coaching business around this not good enough feeling that you've obviously witnessed in your own journey, but around people with, it's showing up as perfectionism, isn't it? It's showing up as, well, burnout, but showing up as imposter syndrome, as you said. The impact on people's mental health is huge, isn't it?
I think I coach a lot of people's holograms for the first couple of sessions because nobody ends up coming and saying, can you help me to be enough? It's really about how can I be better? How can I nail this promotion? And actually it ends up being, when we get a few sessions in, is this is how I tend to disappear myself. This is how I hold back. This is what happens to me around male authority figures. This is, how I lay awake ruminating on that thing I said in the 3:00 meeting and thinking what an idiot I was. So I think it often turns out to be, how can I nail this? How can I be better? So it really comes from that striver place. But actually then there's a dissolving process depending how long we're working together and if somebody's willing to go there. Someone needs to be ready and willing to go there, even if it's been forced, like it was for me with my burnout. I didn't want to go there. It was a forcing function. Some people will willingly go there. It really depends, but I don't see perfectionists often coming to me and saying, help me fix my perfectionism. It's usually help me to be better. And once we start digging under the surface, then the spade hits rock at places like imposter syndrome. So it's not anything that usually presents in the first 2 or 3 sessions. It shows up later. And also people aren't always aware of the way it plays out in their life, are they? They're Correct.
Not aware. And I was thinking before we started today, I was thinking about the fact that so many of us carry that inner critic, don't we, of not good enough. And are you familiar with Stone and Stone's work on the inner critic? And they wrote a brilliant book. I'll reference it in the show notes, but depending on what culture you've been born into will influence what your inner critic is. We're not, as I said, we're not born with an inner critic. So what they find is in Western cultures, it's all, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough, it's all of that. And then in other cultures, it will be you're taking up too much space, you're being an embarrassment, you're not holding back enough. So you've got 2 groups of humans, 2 different societies that have polar opposites in their inner critics. So again, it comes very much from what your background has taught you as well. And you can believe that that's right because you've internalized that inner critic. So you may not show up in therapy or with a coach realizing what's so glaringly obvious to yourself and myself. Do you find that?
I think that the inner critic is such a crafty thing. I think most people will know that they have one. There can definitely be cultural nuances. I think there may also be gender nuances to this. There are nuances to this depending on birth order, I would guess, or what occupation you end up in. And I've met maybe one or two people who don't have a really active inner critic. So I think it's definitely part of the culture that I grew up in. It's definitely the part of the culture that I coach in. And I like to mess with people's inner critic and also mess with my own, because it really is there when we lose that felt sense of enoughness. That's what I noticed. That's a real clue. Like, okay, I have lost the Wi-Fi signal to my wholeness. And that's when all of a sudden my inner critic, who I've named Judgy Janet, pops up and she's criticizing everything. And I've realized that by naming her and separating myself from her, it just changes my relationship with her, because she's never going anywhere. But I don't have to listen to her. So I encourage all of my clients who have very vocal inner critics to name them, and then just dialogue with them, like, oh, Janet, oh, that was a doozy. And it really is, it's a micro practice for me to help move back into wholeness.
I love that.
Naming my inner critic and just playing with it, holding it lightly.
I love that. It's such an effective tool, isn't it? It's such an effective tool. So it really gives that separateness, so you don't internalize it. And you can really work with that with humor, can't you? You can see it very, very differently in that moment. I love that tool. And I urge everyone listening to try that if you have a strong inner critic, because it can be incredibly effective. Mandy, thank you. I'm going to move, because I'm aware of time, I'm going to move to the next part of the podcast, where my wonderful Instagram community sent in some questions.
Great.
And I thought, we could use an expert coach's wisdom on this, yours, to offer some tips, some advice, some help. First question, advice, please. I feel inadequate because I lack expected achievements for my age. Husband, career, children. Oh, it's a tough one, isn't it?
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
The words of my very gritty and very straight-talking Aunt Lillian come to me in this moment. Every time I would ask her as a child, how are you? She'd have a cigarette in the side of her mouth. She'd say, compared to what, kid? Compared to what? And what I'm hearing in that question that you just asked is inadequate compared to what? I think often when we're comparing ourselves to some kind of ideal, is it to our peers? Is it to what our societal expectations, who we were supposed to be at home? Are we comparing ourselves to our more successful friends? So I think there's that, bringing that awareness of compared to what? And are those benchmarks that you might be comparing to? Just think about what they are and whose they are. Yes. I think that's a first step. And maybe starting just a compassionate, curious dialogue of what would it look like to, maybe adequate isn't the right word, or whatever the opposite of inadequate is I always like to link these things to our values, because those are ours. And instead of comparing like, oh, I don't have this husband, or I don't have that house, well, I am a really good person. Yeah. I'm super kind. Yeah, I'm whatever links to your values, I think that's something that is always a touchstone that's very authentic, when all of that, air quotes, inadequacy often isn't even our stuff.
No, I know. I think that was a beautiful way of answering that, actually. And expectation it's a nasty word, isn't it? It's damaging to us. It definitely, when I think about that word expectation, my nervous system is more activated. Whereas when you start to think about compared to, I love that you said compared to what, that was brilliant. Compared to who? Compared to what?
Compared to what, kid?
I mean, immediately I felt myself go, oh, exactly. That weight of the comparison is just gone.
Yeah.
There's no room for it anymore. Wonderful. I have never felt good enough. How can I change that? And will I ever feel good enough again?
I had the brilliant spiritual teacher and author Sonia Choquette on my podcast. And she said, for the part of us, I'm paraphrasing now, for the part of us that keeps that yellow legal ledger, that's constantly looking for evidence of our enoughness or not enoughness, we will never, ever be enough. So the answer is no. For that part that is scanning for enoughness in that critical way, in that you have all these shortcomings way, you will never be enough. So do you want to continue to play a game you can never win? And I wonder if instead of thinking about, again, Aunt Lillian's wisdom, compared to what? So thinking through of what if there were a different question or a different way of looking at this? It's kind of like coming out of the tube station here. This is a very cool, edgy area. And if I choose to focus on the garbage and the cigarette butts and the empty Starbucks cups rolling around in the street, that will be my experience. Oh, this isn't enough. This isn't a nice place. If I focus on this super cool graffiti and the beautiful sunny day and the really cool building that we're sitting in, this is an amazing experience. Enoughness is always available to us, but we're not scanning for it because we have a negativity bias, which is a whole other conversation. But it's a training of what is really enough in this moment, in this conversation, whilst I'm drinking this cup of coffee, whilst I'm on this walk. It's not a state, like a stage set that we walk into. It's like, I have arrived in enoughness. It's something we look for and we cultivate.
Yeah. And it's that way we look for the enoughness around us, isn't
Correct.
it? And the glimmers, the awe.
Yes.
What is enough? Redefining that word enough. It's always we're making it bigger, 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 bigger. What if enough was smaller, 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 smaller?
Precisely that.
Yeah, that soothes my nervous system.
Mine too.
I'm feeling not good enough after a breakup where I really feel I did my best. How do I not take it personally?
First of all, I'm giving you a big virtual hug.
Yeah.
And second of all, I'm curious around the language of that, particularly the I tried my best. And I'm wondering if there's a bit of scorekeeping versus some kind of unuttered ideal that if I just do these things right, if I just perform in this way, then I won't be left. Then I'll be the good wife and, the good mother or what have you. And actually doing our best is no guarantee for anything. And what I would offer as a slightly controversial opinion is there is an opportunity here for you to date and get to fall in love with yourself and to figure out what an amazing human being you are and to discover what you desire, not just what you want, but what you desire. I think if your come from is from the inside out and you're tapping into your life force, as opposed to I did this, almost like a bullet point list of I did all the right things and it still didn't work out. That's coming from outside of you. And my invitation is to be in deep exploration of the exquisite person that you are and what you have to offer, falling in love with yourself, courting yourself. What would that be like?
Gosh, you're talking there and thinking, your clients are so lucky to have you. What a beautiful answer. Wasn't that beautiful? That was so special. And so many of us veer so far from that road, don't we? We'll actually come back to that. That was just stunning, Mandy. That was stunning. Oh, I loved that. That was absolutely gorgeous.
There's a turned onness. When we're not in enoughness, we lose our turn. I don't mean sexually only. Walking through life when you are turned on. You are connected to that life force that is snaking through your body, which is it's magnetic.
And it ripples out.
It does.
It ripples out.
It does.
And I felt and I know we don't have the context of this question, that they were so looking inwards at the other person the whole time. And there was such a neglect of their own needs anyway.
Yes.
Maybe that wasn't best for them. And in high insight, they may come to learn that, hopefully. When someone compliments me, actually this one came up a few times, and I'm also conscious of this with quite a few people I know. When someone compliments me, I immediately feel awkward or like they must be lying. Why is it so hard to believe anything good about myself?
I would get really curious about this person's relationship with receiving.
Okay.
I suspect, and I could be wrong, I suspect that they have a massive portal for giving, supporting, helping others, dropping everything to there's a lot of output going there. And I suspect that their pinhole for receiving is like teeny tiny. And if we think about those like an infinity sign.
Yes.
One side is super small and then the other side is disproportionately large. And I think there's something about just getting really curious. What is blocking me from receiving? And usually that might be something like a belief that clashes with how I think about my worth, how I think about my deservingness to receive, how I feel having the spotlight on me, and then I feel like I'm kind of writhing under all of this attention. So I think this is a deeper inquiry about receiving. And what if you started small? And what if you started doing a series of tiny experiments? You can always go back to the way it was before, but what if you started by simply saying, thank you, and then biting your tongue if you needed to, and seeing what happens? And your judgy Janet might pop up, and there might be a whole variety of judgy Janet, because you're going to bring friends, but sitting in that temporary discomfort, because it will pass. Like trapped wind. It's unpleasant, but it passes, right? And then starting to do that again and again. And I'm not going to say, oh, you're wonderful, because someone's nervous system probably can't receive that if they have a pinhole for receiving. But what if you were open to the possibility that there was something of value and something of truth in that? What if you were open to the possibility? So you're bringing yourself up to a baseline of neutral.
Yeah.
And doing tiny, tiny experiments to build up your capacity to receive.
Yeah. You're so right. It's the starting very small, because that can feel so daunting to take compliments and try, but actually starting much smaller. You don't have to get to 100 straight away.
Correct.
Or get to, we might cut this, or I say get to the place where someone I know, I won't mention who, and it's wonderful. I learnt this years ago, or witnessed them years ago, and someone came up to them and said, you look so well. And they just said, yes. And I was like, wow, to have that confidence just to say, yes, I know I do. That's self-worth. I'm not saying we could all get to that level, but just witnessing how other people receive can be. But I would also say there, Mandy, and I'm sure you agree, it comes to cultural, societal as well. We find it, I think in general, a lot of people find it hard to receive compliments. So I loved your advice there. That was beautiful. Mandy, I can't thank you enough for today.
Oh,
it's been such a pleasure. It's gone far too quickly. I just could sit and bombard you with good enough questions all day long. So thank you so much for coming to speak with me.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So well. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much if you could follow the show, leave a quick rating, and maybe even a review to let others know what you think and whether they may enjoy the conversation too. Your support genuinely means so much. Thank you. Enjoy your day.